Welcome to this after-action report. From May through July 2024, the International Kriegsspiel Society hosted a Kriegsspiel game between Mark's Game Room and Little Wars TV. The game is set in the midst of the American Civil War in March 1862. Historically, Major General McClellan, commander of the Army of Potomac, ordered an ambitious operation where the Army landed at Fort Monroe and attempted to take Richmond from the southeast in a bid to outflank the rebels. This is known as the Peninsula Campaign. The operation was logistically impressive as it moved 121,000 men, 44 artillery batteries, 1,150 wagons, 15,000 horses, plus equipment and supplies. However, the campaign ultimately resulted in failure as the rebels managed to defend their capital and force McClellan to retreat. This game plays out a different scenario, asking, what if McClellan had simply marched south overland to Richmond, much like General Grant did 2 years later? The game is played at an operational scale with 4 turns per in-game day. The smallest unit was a brigade. Logistics and supply were simulated. Players gave orders and received updates via Discord. On each turn, a player receives a written update, which includes a description of what has occurred since the previous turn, plus any reports from NPC subordinates. They also receive a screenshot like this one shown here, which allows them to see what is going on in their vicinity. Note that enemy positions are not well known, and even friendly forces are often out of sight. Members of Mark's Game Room were chosen to play as the commanders of the Union Army of the Potomac. Little Wars TV was chosen to play the Confederate Army of Northern Virginia, with General Joe Johnston commanding. This is a high-level view of the game map created by Damon in the IKS community. He took GCACW maps and heavily modified them to create a unified historic operational map of the Eastern Theater of the American Civil War. This portion of the map covers the region of Northern Virginia as well as parts of Maryland. Most of the conflict will occur around Manassas Junction between the Bull Run and Broad Run rivers and the area south of Harper's Ferry. As we look closer at the main area of conflict, you can see the terrain is mostly flat. 3 major rivers separate the territory: the Cedar, Bull, and Broad Runs. The area between the Cedar Run and the Potomac River is forested wilderness. The Orange and Alexandria Railroad runs from Washington southwest across northern Virginia and will serve as a key source of supply for both armies. Further northwest, the Blue Ridge Mountain Range marks the beginning of the Shenandoah Valley. The Potomac River runs by Harper's Ferry and is the boundary between Virginia and Maryland. The game began on March 13, 1862, with most of the Union Army already situated across the Potomac River southwest of Washington. General Banks' 4th Corps guarded Harper's Ferry. The Confederates are spread out. Generals Smith and D.H. Hill are camped south of the Broad Run. General Magruder is set up further south near Orange Courthouse, and General Jackson's Valley District is camped at Winchester and guards the Shenandoah Valley. Jackson was ordered by Johnson to march east and leave the valley with the objective of operating on the Federal flank and drawing off their forces. The main Confederate Army would concentrate around Bristow Station, defend the Bull Run, and ascertain the location of the main thrust of the Union. Banks was ordered to leave Harper's Ferry, find and tie up General Jackson. The main army force was to march southwest along parallel paths with the goal of finding and defeating elements of the Confederate Army before they could concentrate. The Union scored an early victory as Sumner secured a crossing on the Bull Run before the Confederates could stop him. This forced the Confederates back to form defenses behind the Broad Run. Union and Confederate cavalry clashed between the Broad and Bull Runs as both sides scout each other's position. General Magruder is taking a train from Fredericksburg south of the map. Smith and Hill are vastly outnumbered and risk being overrun if they stay and fight the Union. Meanwhile, in the valley, Jackson's foot cavalry moves quickly as he makes for Snicker's Gap across the Blue Ridge Mountains. Banks cautiously moves southward, scouting to determine Jackson's position. The following day, Hill and McDowell both move to take Gainesville. A small battle erupts. McDowell is more concentrated and forces Hill to retreat back towards Buckland. McDowell elects not to pursue and consolidates in Gainesville, with Heintzelman's 3rd Corps arriving in his rear later that day. Smith and Sumner's forces stare at each other across the broad run, neither willing to attempt a contested crossing over a ford. Smith has destroyed the main bridge. Keyes deploys on Sumner's eastern flank, guarding the Cedar Run. Off-map, Magruder is on the march north from Fredericksburg. The Union has a small window of opportunity before Magruder's arrival, where they outnumber the Confederate forces more than 2-1. Jackson has crossed the mountains and continued east into Leesburg, while Banks has also crossed through a more northern gap and is in hot pursuit. Magruder makes a daring, and some may say foolish, night march to arrive quickly and provide some badly needed support to Smith and Hill. However, his men are exhausted and caught by surprise as he encounters Keyes, who is advancing south. Their forces clash in several small meeting engagements where Keyes wins each encounter. Magruder is only saved by Keyes' lack of aggression in pressing the attack. Despite their successes at Gainesville and south of the Cedar Run, McClellan orders Keyes to march during the night and take a defensive stance north of the Cedar Run. This will give Magruder's men time for badly needed rest. Smith and Hill continue to build defenses along the broad run and await a Union attack which never comes. As McClellan receives news from Banks that Jackson is marching east, he diverts Heintzelman's Third Corps to protect the northern flank and perhaps trap Jackson between the two armies. The diversion of Heintzelman and the arrival of Magruder put the Confederates on more equal footing with the Union. The window of opportunity has closed. Perhaps the most decisive and significant battle in the campaign occurred west of Leesburg. Knowing that Banks was quickly chasing him, Jackson hatched a plan using false dispatches whereby he would convince Banks that he was attempting to move east and cross the Potomac. Meanwhile, he moved the majority of his army south, around Hogback Mountain. Using a signal corps on the mountain to watch Banks' movements, he launched an attack on Banks' column while on the march. The attack is so devastating an entire division is routed. Banks falls back to recover, and Jackson elects not to continue the assault, a missed opportunity. On the 16th, the three Union corps in the south find themselves too spread apart. With Keyes defending Cedar Run, Magruder's troops are afforded a badly needed rest. Meanwhile, Smith smells opportunity. Seeing that some fords have been left unguarded, he crosses and launches heavy flanking attacks with Hill supporting against portions of Keyes and Sumner's corps. Both attacks succeed, and by nightfall the Union forces are on the run. During the attack, the Confederates managed to capture one of two Federal balloons being used for reconnaissance. On this day, Hill was quite weak as he had been given half his force to support Smith's attack. If McDowell had aggressively attacked Hill, he would have been beaten. Late in the day, news of Banks' defeat reaches McClellan. He orders McDowell to fall back. Hill advances cautiously late in the day and finds Gainesville empty. The Federal depot there is set ablaze. While Banks spends the day recovering from the ambush and Jackson decides what to do next, Heintzelman's Third Corps advances north in three separate columns. They make contact with Jackson's outer pickets late in the day. Jackson realizes he's in trouble and at risk of being cut off and surrounded. The following day, the Union are put on the back foot by ongoing Confederate assaults. Smith pushes Sumner all the way back across the Bull Run, while Hill launches a major attack against McDowell with Smith's support. McDowell's army is forced back several miles but holds. Magruder advances to the Cedar Run and fills out Keyes' position. Overall, the Union has ceded the initiative to the Confederates. The numerical advantage has been squandered by sending Third Corps to chase after Jackson. Up north, Jackson escapes the Union trap by moving north and west. He now races to Harper's Ferry with Banks and Heintzelman following. Banks has sent a small contingent of cavalry ahead to guard the town. The following day, Jackson captures Harper's Ferry and defends the crossings at the Shenandoah River. Down south, McDowell retreats north of the Bull Run. Hill gives his men badly needed rest after the previous day's hard fighting. Smith and Sumner stare at each other again, this time across the Bull Run. The main action occurs in the east across the Cedar Run. Magruder launches a heavy attack on Keyes' left flank. Keyes' corps is overwhelmed and begins to retreat northwest. Stewart's cavalry, under the direction of Smith, take advantage of the situation and the distraction and cuts north where they destroy the rail line. McClellan, feeling he cannot proceed with this campaign without additional reinforcements, orders a general retreat. This was a well-fought victory for the Little Wars TV team. This game was made possible by the efforts of 17 umpires from the International Kriegsspiel Society. It also featured over 25 IKS members who acted as support staff for the primary players. We are grateful to everyone who participated, especially the members of Mark's Game Room and Little Wars TV, who made this such an enjoyable game. We are proud to conclude the first annual Kriegsspiel Cup and look forward to hosting the second Kriegsspiel Cup next year.